2 years old. That's the age of the latest victim of Pakistan-backed terror, Titu Soni from Rajasthan. Now, even as Prime Minister Modi was getting ready to take his oath for the third time, terrorists struck in Jammu. They opened fire at a 53-seater bus going to the Mata Vaishno Devi shrine. The bus plunged into the deep gorge. 10 people, including Titu and 14-year-old Anurag Verma, were killed. 40 other people were injured. The Pakistan-backed Resistance Front, which is a front for the Lashkar-e-Taiba, has claimed responsibility. Now, this dastardly attack on civilians in Jammu once again highlights the growing terror attack threat south of the Pir Panjal. As security forces hunt for the perpetrators, the questions we are asking is, why has Jammu become a terror hub? And more importantly, why the double standards when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir? All eyes on Rafah, but none on Riyasi. Joining me to discuss this are Lieutenant General Konsang Himalaya Singh, Dr. Priyanka Singh, and my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul here in the studio with me. Welcome to the News 9 Plus show. I want to start by asking General Himalaya Singh this question. Why Jammu, General Singh? Why are terrorists now seeking safe haven south of the Pir Panjal? How has this shift happened? Could you tell us?
The area south of Pir Panjal were very active from the insurgency and militancy point of view prior to around, say, till the year 2010-11. Thereafter, till the last few years, south of Pir Panjal has been relatively free of militancy. In the last few years, we see a sharp increase in the activities of these Pakistan-backed terrorists. The reason why Jammu region becomes important is, firstly, from the point of view of infiltration routes from the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, is one of the major routes of infiltration all weather, whether during winters or summers. That is one reason I can see. The second reason I would like to share with you is that the area is a mixed population, right. Hindus and Muslims, in some degree of increase or decrease in percentages, right from south of Pir Panjal till Jammu. So the militant groups or their masters will like to create some kind of a communal disharmony, right. So that Jammu and Kashmir is kept on the boil at all times.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The third I attribute is that as we see, reasonable amount of peace and prosperity in Jammu region today, it will be endeavor of any anti-India elements to disturb that progress in some way. So this is manifesting in such kind of activities, and I think this kind of activities will be seen in the near future also.
Many more activities in the near future. Aditya, we've been seeing a spate of such terror attacks in the last couple of years, especially targeting civilians in Jammu and Kashmir, in Jammu particularly. As General Singh mentioned, that this shift to south of the Pir Panjal is because the terrain favors terrorists. How different was this attack on the busload of civilians in Riyasi, different from previous attacks?
One thing that we need to understand, Sandeep, is that in the early 90s and in early 2000s, we actually saw resurgence of this kind of terrorism. And when the terrorism began in the 90s as well, the south of the Pir Panjal, particularly Poonch, Riyasi, yes, and Rajouri, were particularly used by the Pakistani terrorists. They used to infiltrate, have terror attacks in this entire region, and also send in terrorists from this region to South Kashmir and further to Srinagar, not just to attack the security forces, but at that time, minorities as well. Post 2000s, from perhaps 2003, 2004, we've had a peaceful time, particularly in Riyasi. I have traveled extensively in Riyasi because I had relatives there in Jyotipuram and Riyasi, and this has been a very peaceful region.
Right.
since 2021, a couple of years after the abrogation of Article 370, we've had a resurgence of terrorism in this belt, particularly Poonch and Rajouri.
Right.
We've had continuous terror attacks
Right.
in which several of our security forces have been killed. We had dastardly attack in which paras, 9 para I think was involved, and we had heavy casualties in that as well.
Right.
What has happened is that our focus in the Rajouri Poonch belt, the south of the Pir Panjal, has not been there, particularly of the security forces.
Yes.
They perhaps tend to treat it as a local crime still and do not realize the consequences of the upper reaches in this region, which is a hiding area for the terrorists. In many of the cases, what has also been seen, Sandeep, is that terrorists enter, they conduct recce, they go back, then they again enter for the terrorism act, and finally go back to Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So this is a challenge. Perhaps we need to recalibrate our security strategy in this entire region. We've had particularly a safe and peaceful Kashmir as compared to resurgence of this kind of terrorism in this region. And imagine, this is also a message from Pakistan.
Yes.
It comes at a time when Prime Minister Narendra Modi's swearing-in ceremony was on. I was at Rashtrapati Bhavan when I got the first phone call from Jammu that this terror attack had happened and almost 9 people had been killed.
This is about an hour before the swearing-in began.
Exactly an hour before. Look at the timing, look at the message, look at the heavy casualties that have been done by Pakistan. And all that while Pakistan Prime Minister was silent. It's only today in the afternoon that he has the guts perhaps to congratulate the Prime Minister. But the question certainly is that how do we deal with this? This is a new massive challenge that they will have to deal at a security level, politically, domestically also, because the opposition will raise questions on the government as to what their strategy really is against Pakistan.
What is the strategy against Pakistan? Indeed, one of the reasons that the Pakistan Prime Minister was not invited to yesterday's swearing-in was the fact that terror and talks can't go hand in hand. I think that's the Government of India's policy. And terror has now returned. And Dr. Priyanka Singh, what is the message that Pakistan is trying to convey with this dastardly attack, this killing of civilians in Riyasi?
I think we really have to see this attack in some kind of perspective. And if you talk about Pakistan, the fact that it happened on a day when a government headed by Prime Minister Modi was being sworn in for a 3rd consecutive term, and an impressive lineup of foreign dignitaries were in New Delhi. I think the idea may have been to really dampen the atmosphere for that matter. And secondly, we also have to understand that this is a government which has virtually decimated Pakistan's Kashmir strategy. And I would say even after 5 years of the abrogation, the establishment there is kind of really seeking to establish, to find out, I think, to resurrect its Kashmir strategy. And so that it has some kind of traction, regarding Pakistan's position on the application of Article 370. So it was really expected, I think, that they would at least try to do something just to have that kind of attention. And third point, just a very short point I would like to address is that we also have to see the pattern on the attacks against the pilgrims. So they have been happening of late, and especially in the aftermath of the application of Article 370. I mean, in 2021, as Aditya also mentioned, there was an attack on pilgrims who were traveling to Vaishno Devi Shrine, and of course this group of pilgrims are also going to the same place. But this has been happening over a period of time, and we really have to look at it. I mean, why these pilgrims are being targeted in the larger perspective, because earlier the attacks were more sort of directed against the security forces, but now these innocent pilgrims have been targeted who actually belong to other parts of the country and not to J&K per se.
Right. This deliberate targeting of civilians, Aditya, the fact that pilgrims are being targeted, does that indicate that there's more trouble in store with the Amarnath Yatra beginning for the next 2 months?
That's the biggest challenge for the administration. Imagine it's not a government that's ruling in Jammu and Kashmir right now, even though the security and the law and order is with the MHA. And of course, they have foolproof security, the Northern Command, the CRPF, the J&K police are working tirelessly for that. But it's a big challenge. The pilgrims all across India, lakhs in number, throng to the Amarnath shrine from Jammu to Baltal. And that is a question that they will be asking. This year, record numbers again were being expected that 5 to 6 lakh pilgrims might come in. So what would be the security preparedness? How will the government, the security and the administration assure the common people that you don't need to fear? And as Dr. Priyanka also mentioned, I firmly believe that this is a modus operandi, this is a strategy of Pakistan to create a communal divide in the south of the Pir Panjal. As General was also mentioning, our esteemed guest, that this belt has a Hindu population and a Muslim population who have lived peacefully ever since the 90s terror attacks. Yes, there were a few massacres that happened in Ghul and a few other areas, but this area has been relatively peaceful. There were incidents in Kishtwar and other places also, but this kind of terror attack is new. We've had in May 22, I think, attack on the Vaishno Devi pilgrims, in which 2 to 4 pilgrims had died. But this is a deliberate strategy at a time when Pakistan has failed completely in Kashmir, not able to internationalize it. They are targeting south of the Pir Panjal. They are creating a new belt for infiltration and to target a new kind of population in this area.
Absolutely. And General Singh, Aditya mentioned the fact that they are deliberately targeting these regions, as you've said so yourself. Now the fact that Pir Panjal, the terrain is very different from the kind that the security forces have been used to operating of late. They're high altitude jungles, dense terrain, the kind that favors the attackers who hide and use these infiltration routes. What is the kind of change in tactics that the Indian Army would need to do to tackle these new infiltrators who are hiding there and literally popping up to carry out such horrific terror attacks?
I think to begin with, we have to have a very close cooperation with the civil population, which we are doing. I think the security forces have done it well.
Yes.
And a very robust synergy between the civil establishment and military establishment there. That is extremely important, and also traditional supporters of the military like Gujars and Bakrawals. They have to. We actually have to go overboard to, unless the people support. I think no amount of counter-terrorist or counter-insurgency tactics will work. Having said that, I also believe that a large number of highly technical intelligence and other type of intelligence gathering and surveillance are available these days. So we have to exploit the technology more, because the troops who are they are extremely well trained. They will produce results. They will neutralize all these anti-national elements. But the intelligence is the main issue here. And intelligence is basically human intelligence is the most accurate, plus technical intelligence. And in that type of a terrain, where we know it's a broken ground, and I know tunnels can be made, and so many. It's a place where it's very difficult to actually trace 2 or 3 militants hiding in some caves or in some corner of the country. So therefore, the intelligence is the key, and synergy between the civilian establishment like police and the military. And I've served for nearly 10 years in the entire area south of Pir Panjal, in that area, and I can assure you that justice will be done to the perpetrators of these attackers and their backers. And somebody mentioned about you mentioned about the Amarnath and all. I can assure you that foolproof security. I think we have a system where we can provide a very high degree of confidence level for security for Amarnath Yatra as well.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Priyanka Singh, there's been a debate of late whether the army should be thinning out of Jammu and Kashmir, given the fact that the situation is largely returning to normal. And in the past, there have been certain forces that have been moved out of counterinsurgency and shifted towards the northern front with China. Do you think these kind of attacks would actually pause that kind of redeployment of forces and the fact that the army will continue to remain in Jammu and Kashmir to tackle these kind of incidents. What's your take on this?
I think if you ask me personally, I believe that this is not the time to really kind of for the army to really recede from Jammu and Kashmir in that sense, because this is not the time. We are still in some kind of a very delicate transition period. And I think the army, which has been there for a very long time, I think it has to see us through that delicate transition that I'm talking about. And such kind of terrorist attacks which have been happening, and I would disagree with you on that we shouldn't call it a spate of attacks, because we would all agree that the scale of attacks, the volume of attacks, they have definitely come down from what it was in the past. So, I mean, but irrespective of the fact, if there are attacks like this happening, I think the debate on whether the army should be there or not, or whether in lesser numbers or things like that, I think this kind of a debate should wait for some more time.
This kind of a debate should wait for some more time. But Aditya, there's another debate that we've been talking about, the fact that how celebrities, the way they've responded to the Riyasi attack, vis-a-vis, say, the Rafah, all eyes on Rafah but no eyes on Riyasi. Why these double standards?
You know, Sandeep, I don't take these celebrities seriously, even though they do, people do, and people, of course, follow them on Instagram, on Twitter, on social media. And what really happened a few days back was that there was a lot of propaganda, a lot of news stories doing rounds around what happened in Rafah, the continuing war between Israel and Hamas. These same celebrities did not tweet all eyes on southern Israel when the terror attack took place on 7th of October.
Absolutely.
And forget that. You know, there are two ends to this. One, the celebrities are completely silent when Indians have been killed.
Yes.
They are mute spectators. Are Indians killed in such a barbaric manner not heart-wrenching enough?
A 2-year-old boy.
A 2-year-old boy, Titu Soni.
We can't, unfortunately play out the image of Titu Soni for obvious reasons, ethical reasons. But the fact is that that image of 2-year-old Titu Soni killed in that terror attack will haunt us for months to come.
And you know, Sandeep, Titu isn't the only one. He has lost 3 family members.
Yes.
There is 14-year-old Anurag as well. There are 9 innocents who have lost their lives. What was their crime?
Yes.
And why doesn't, hearts of these celebrities bleed for these kinds of civilian killings? That is the kind of hypocrisy, double standards and double talk that we are witnessing. You know, these celebrities may be doing this for their own PR, publicity, but at a time like this, when the nation needs to unite and come together and stand behind these victim families, stand behind India against this global Islamist terrorism, one really questions and, imagines that what really happens, why this hypocrisy? And of course, there are several countries also that are completely silent.
Yes.
There's a huge debate on that there should be a cohesive fight against terrorism, but countries are completely silent, even though the casualties are 9. There are almost 35 people who are injured, many of them battling for their lives.
Exactly. No, and that's the unkindest cut of all, the double standards that our own citizens sometimes seem to follow when it comes to terrorism. It's fashionable to talk about terror attacks and hostage situations in other countries, but when it comes to our own citizens, there's absolute stunning silence. But that's all we have for this segment of Terror Hub Jammu. We're going to be tracking that story very closely. Thank you very much for joining us, General Singh and Dr. Priyanka Singh. We'll keep coming back to you for insights on this. Aditya Raj Kaul continues to join me in the studio. Israeli special forces fought intense gun battles with Hamas in and around the Nusayrat refugee camp. They raided this refugee camp to rescue 4 hostages who were in captivity for 246 days. These hostages had been held in 2 apartment buildings just 200 meters apart. They were surrounded by Hamas gunmen and thousands of Palestinian civilians in a busy central Gaza neighborhood. Now, this mission required the precision of brain surgery. That's how the Israeli military described the complexity of this operation. And left behind in Gaza was scenes of chaos, destruction and death. Does this raid echo the 1976 rescue operation at Entebbe in Uganda? And what are the features of a classic commando operation? To discuss this raid, I'm joined by Major General V.K. Datta, special forces operation trained by Israel, and of course my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul. General Datta, welcome to the News 9 Plus show.
Thank you, Sandeep. Pleasure to be with you once again.
Break down this operation for us, General Datta. This complex rescue operation which rescued 4 hostages but led to what Hamas is saying the deaths of over 200 civilians.
Yeah, Sandeep, if you talk about hostage rescue operations, this has been one of the most complicated and a difficult operation to carry out, and especially in a heavily built-up area, which is crowded by hostile civilians and also by the terrorists who are guarding these hostages. So if you ask any special forces man that you have to rescue hostages in such an environment, it is a nightmare. The basic principle of a hostage rescue operation is total surprise and shock at the last moment, precision activity to extricate those hostages alive and take them out safely. Now, if you look at the overall scenario, where there are thousands of hostile civilians, it's a built-up area, number of buildings which are more than 3 to 4 stories high, and the hostages are not kept in one place. They are being moved and shifted constantly. So this operation has been actually, I'll say, a example of special operations. Maybe it will need a lot of study, but what emerges now is that the Israeli special forces choose the daytime to carry out this operation. Because in the daytime you can see, identify and neutralize faster than at night time. At night time you do not know from where are you being fired upon. You cannot identify the hostages and the civilian population which is there. So that is why many times special forces choose to operate in the daytime to overcome that disadvantage at night. And if you recollect that we have also carried out certain daytime operations in Punjab, vis-a-vis the operations carried out by the army earlier at night, and the results achieved, you are well aware of that. And we also adapted the same concept of a daytime operation in the afternoon to identify and utilize targets, use our snipers effectively, have proper command and control, identify the areas where we are going, and carry out the rescue. Now the problem arose was that once these special forces boys inducted in with total stealth, that was the aim, that the initial force which is going to carry out the rescue will get in absolute stealthily. And once they have got in, there were additional forces to ensure the extrication of the hostages from a hostile area. More than 3 brigades of the Israeli forces were on standby. The Israeli Air Force, the Special Operations helicopters, all these assets were put on a standby and sent to assist the Special Forces, Special Unit Jammu and the Shariat Matkal, once they execute the rescue, how to get them out from a hostile area when the terrorists would have got alerted, and they will start engaging the smaller group of unit which had gone in for the actual surprise to rescue these hostages. So from that point of view, it has been a very complex operation. Now if you talk about the collateral damage, once the hostages were rescued, that is the time when the terrorists started using the civilians as shields and started engaging the special forces, and that is the time when they had to retaliate and maybe even call in an airstrike, which actually led to the number of civilians getting killed
collateral
during the execution of the order.
Right, absolutely. And Aditya, what has been the mood in Israel after the rescue of these 4 hostages? All of them were grabbed by from that music festival. And I'm fully aware of the fact that there are over 100 hostages that continue to remain in Hamas's captivity. Tell us how it has impacted Israel's morale during this war.
Firstly, in this particular case, it's very much understandable that there are civilian casualties, but that is a war. One, there is a war that is ongoing, and then the hostile enemy, you know, the kind of acts that Hamas is doing in that entire area, even though it's been more than 7-8 months, there are more than 100 hostages that are still there. The exact number provided by the IDF is 120. 4 of them were rescued yesterday, very bravely by the IDF. And of course, in such kind of a scenario where in Rafah and in
Yes.
adjoining areas, in built-up areas, in civilian areas, in even humanitarian camps set up by the
Yes,
UN,
yes.
that hostages have been kept, it
Right.
would be difficult for the IDF to, rescue those hostages without casualties. And
Yes.
let me also remind you that nobody knows if at all civilians died, and if civilians died,
Yes.
how many civilians really died. Because
we're
there's a
going by
lot
the
of-
numbers that Hamas is providing
yeah,
us.
there are 274 is
Yes.
the number that Hamas has provided,
Right.
the so-called Gaza Health Ministry.
Yes.
But the reality is unknown. Remember, Sandeep, just a few months back,
Yes.
there was a propaganda against the Al-Shifa hospital,
Yes.
where they said that there was a direct strike. There were multiple other hospitals also
Right, right.
that they were targeted. But there are two aspects to it.
Yes.
Underneath these hospitals were tunnels.
Yes.
On the other hand, Hamas used to pose as doctors and nurses in this area. They had their recruits, terror recruits
Yes.
in this entire hospital. And of course, to rescue hostages, Israel, IDF will do whatever is possible. Now, to your question, there are two aspects again to it. One is what's happening internally in Israel domestically. Benny Gantz, a close ally of the government who had supported, has taken back his support over Benjamin Netanyahu's ways of dealing with the Gaza war. Benny Gantz is seen as a centrist person. He has quit from the war cabinet, and now Ben Gvir and others who are ultra-right politicians want to be in that war cabinet along with Netanyahu, who again do not completely support Netanyahu and want to go all hands down against Hamas and do not surrender to the global pressures. Second, and most important and significant, Sandeep, is the global outrage that is continuously happening. Even US proposing a peaceful deal, which Israel says isn't completely acceptable, and at the same time the masters of Hamas sitting in Qatar do not agree with the deal. It is highly unlikely, even though there is pressure from several countries in the Middle East and of course the United States, that there is a deal that will be immediately achievable between these countries. Of course, there could be a step-by-step formula that would be in place, but it's highly unlikely after so many casualties, especially when 120 hostages are still there, that there could be any kind of a deal. Especially, Israel will certainly not agree to a deal which asks them to completely stop their war against Hamas. They will do whatever is possible to rescue those hostages. There's a lot of pressure that also is building by the forum of the hostage families who are protesting in Tel Aviv every Sunday. There are almost riot-like situations in Tel Aviv every evening. Thousands of people coming out and demanding justice, and it's a long war that only continues. And unfortunately, the global propaganda of Hamas survives in this last case. My last point here, Sandeep, is that Hamas has all kinds of people supporting them in Gaza. In Rafah, in this latest case, which the IDF has pointed out, and Shin Bet as well, that there was a global journalist with a news channel working from Qatar. And he had held at least 3 to 4 hostages at his house at a building in Rafah. Now, this is seriously concerning. There have been reports earlier also when the attack took place in southern Israel on 7th October that journalists were supporting Hamas. In fact, they traveled along with Hamas terrorists in southern Israel and then went back with him along with the hostages. That is a big, big concern.
That's a big concern. Indeed, it illustrates the complexity of the kind of operation that General Datta was mentioning. The fact that not only do you have the terrorists operating among civilians, but you also have civilian collaborators who are actively keeping hostages in their homes. And that was one surprise, General Datta, the fact that many of these hostages were being kept by fairly well-to-do families in Gaza, and they were being used as domestic helps even going by the accounts of the rescued hostages. They were asked to do housework. I mean, fortunately, they were not harmed. It doesn't look like they were harmed in any major kind of way. But coming back to this point that you mentioned, that the complexity of an operation like this, and I'm reminded of that very famous inverted triangle of Admiral William McRaven, a Special Forces officer, very famously put those 6 principles of a Special Forces op, and we'll play that on screen so that you can, analyze that for us. At the top of the pyramid are 3. There's basically the 6 principles of successful Special Forces operation. The first 3 principles, of course, surprise, speed, purpose. The second row has security, of course, which is operational security, and repetition, the fact that you should be able to repeat it a number of times. And at the bottom, that very pinnacle, the very base of the pyramid, in fact, the base of this inverted pyramid rests on simplicity. General Datta, break down these 6 points, these 6 factors for us. Admiral William McRaven's 6 principles of Special Forces operations and how it's played out in this.
Yeah, Sandeep, I would like to differentiate a bit in this entire inverted triangle. When you call about a conventional special operation, these 6 parameters are absolutely applicable. But when we come on to the special operations meant for a hostage rescue, there are slight variations in this entire concept.
Right.
And to share that with you, while these 6 principles remain constant, the other principles which we talk about, the ones which are needed for a hostage rescue, they are basically all the plans which are made for a hostage rescue. They follow the concept of KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. That
Keep it
means
simple,
the plan
keep
which
it stupid. Yes.
it should be so simple that even the most stupid guy can understand that.
Right.
So that is the first. Then once we have made the plan, we carry out rehearsals by the operative to be able to understand their role and responsibility during the mission. So whether they made the models or whatever they did, it is to make that plan, rehearse the plan so that everybody, every team member understands his particular role in the entire operation. Then we come on to the main factor of the command, control and communication, which is at the operational control level, where the commander or the people who are controlling the operation, they are in communication with the last man on the ground, so that they can guide them and take a feedback and if need be reinforce or provide support when needed. So that is very important, command, control and communication. And then we talk about the contingency plan. For everything you do, if something goes wrong, we have a contingency plan. So all these things, in the inverted triangle, if I'm elaborating that, so starting with the lowest one where you're talking about the surprise, you're talking about the speed of operations, security of operations, and then finally when we come on to the execution part of the operation, then we say at the final stage, stealth to approach the target where the hostages have been kept, so that your surprise is maintained till the last moment.
Right.
If you lose the prize, the hostage rescue operation is gone. You cannot rescue the hostages. Whereas in a convention operation, when if I'm going to strike a target, carry out a destruction of an ammunition dump or an enemy headquarter, this war game is slightly different. In a hostage rescue, you have to reach the target physically, rescue the hostages physically, take them out safely. Whereas when I have to go and carry out a strike behind enemy lines, I could be just going close to the target and designating the target with a laser designator, which is struck by an artillery or an air shell.
Right.
So that is the difference between a conventional special forces operation and a hostage rescue operation. Then coming on to the final phase, stealth, speed when you are approach the target, shock. You shock the enemy so that he is not able to react. Whether you use explosives, you use anything else, you use a stun grenade at the last moment, stealth, speed, shock. And then is the precision, neutralization of the terrorists and extrication of hostages and a safe exit. That is the most crucial part. In a operation what has been carried out in Nusrat, in the current operation, to extricate the hostages once they've been rescued was again a big operation by itself. They had to take them out under hostile fire when the terrorists and the Hamas militants were closing on to the target with the RPGs, with machine guns and everything, using the civilians to fire on the hostages as the special forces. That became another part of the extrication part. So as compared to a conventional special forces operation where the 6 principles are there, in the hostage rescue, then these 6 principles and in addition, the other elements are also added to ensure that you have been able to succeed. If you lose the hostages, your operation is a failure. Irrespective of the fact whether the commandos involved in the operation get wounded or killed is a separate issue. So a clean operation means the strike force went in without getting or losing anybody. they take out all the hostages alive and come back safely into their own area after the operation. So that is called the success of the operation. And in this operation, it was a very, very complicated combination of all these factors which were played in for the hostage rescue. And I'd like to add on something. Now, when we say there are about 120 Israeli hostages still left with Hamas, out of the 120, only 77 are alive, and almost about 70 odd are the dead bodies of the hostages, which actually confirmed that they are no more alive. So, when you talk about what is left with Hamas today, the living hostages are about 77. And Israel is not going to stop, irrespective of hostage rescue or not. Their aim is to finish off Hamas. Whether they have to enter Rafah, they have to do whatever, they will do it. And that is the problem today. The world is trying to take the side of the Palestinians, the Hamas people. That is the propaganda being played up. But Israel is very clear in the goal. In the very beginning, Netanyahu had said that now once we respond, your 10 generations will remember this, that if you do a thing like you did on 7th of October, this is what is going to happen to you. And look at the consequences. More than 36,000 people have died. How many terrorists, how many civilians, you can't actually count them. But that is the repercussion. You strike, you carry out a terrorist attack, and this is what you're going to get back. And that is what is happening today, and the world is crying about it.
General Datta, what are the lessons that India can learn from an operation like this? You're a Special Forces Operations officer. You've spent your life in the SF. What are the first questions in your mind? If you were to go there and imbibe lessons from this operation for us, what would they be?
See, the thing is that selection and maintenance of aim. Once you're a terrorist, always a terrorist. Unlike, you catch a terrorist, you hand him over to the judiciary, he fights a case, he comes back again, and he's back in the activities again. So once a terrorist is always a terrorist, you must finish off the root cause of terrorism, whether it is being perpetuated from cross-border, whether it is being done from within. You have to cut the root. And in our case, the terrorism is emanating from Pakistan. If it is emanating from Pakistan, and if we have to finish it off, then maybe we should strike at the roots of Pakistan so that they are no more able to carry out any terrorist attack on the soil of India. And maybe we are working towards that. Time will tell. And so if I have to plan and carry out a counter-terror operation to completely neutralize the reasons and causes, it is not within India. It is a cross-border terrorism supported and motivated by an inimical power, and to name it Pakistan, right from 1947, starting with the attack in Srinagar in 1947 by saying, "To raider aa gaya." There were no raiders, it was Pakistan Army in civil, and ultimately they came out in the open.
Right.
And I wish there was no ceasefire then, there would have been no POK, there would have been no line of control, and the entire situation would have been normal.
Right. No, General Datta, now this specific operation that Israel just carried out at this camp, what are the lessons that you would want as a Special Forces operator to learn from them? How would you break it down and digest it so that our Special Forces can benefit from the kind of operation that they have carried out?
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned to you that the first lesson is that the operation was carried out in the daytime.
Yes.
We have also planned operations in the daytime. Daytime gives you advantage of better identification, better shooting. Your snipers can engage. Your support, which is coming either from the drones or from the air, can identify and neutralize targets very, very accurately without affecting the forces which have gone into the hostile area. So that is the first lesson. Night operation versus day operation to achieve surprise. I always prefer a day operation, and in many of the operations which I carried out personally, I did them during the daytime because that was the lesson I learned long back. Second thing is, now when you have to extricate a hostage from a hostile neighborhood, which is highly populated in multi-story buildings, you have to have a very, very integrated plan. You have to achieve total surprise at least till the time the hostages have been saved or matlab rescued. Then comes the question of extrication. So the question is that our air assets, our unarmed assets, our satellite imagery, our intelligence, our AI, factoring in the AI today in your operations is very, very necessary. Israel is using the artificial intelligence in a big way in controlling and executing operations. So I will say that in future, our special operation forces, our commandos in the armed forces, National Security Guard, the special group element, they also must learn from this operation and plan their future operations if a need be in such an hostile environment, how to carry out a rescue and execute. It also needs regular forces. 3 brigades of the IDF were standby, who actually then supported fire support for the extrication of these troops. In JNK, if you recollect in 1989, when Ruwaya Saeed was kidnapped, I had been tasked to carry out a rescue operation. And once I went in there, I was told to stay back because neither the army, neither the CAPF are carrying out any operations. I, with a single unit of the 51st Special Action Group, were carrying out counter-terrorist operations in J&K. So I had requested the governor, ki, sir, while I can carry out, go and strike a target, but for me to execute, I will need the help of the army. So one army battalion and one brigade was dedicated to me for providing me support for execution purposes. And many operations are carried out. When I just went in with just 5-10 boys, we struck the target. We were surrounded by civilians. Then I had to tell, okay, come in now. And then the army came and cordoned the area, and then we were able to get out. So you have to have a combination of the higher force level. You have to have the strike force, which will go in with stealth, very selected lot of boys who will go in, strike the target, achieve total surprise. But for execution, you need a different technique to get out, and it will differ from target to target.
Right.
So the
Thank you.
examples which have been...
General Datta, I'm afraid we're completely out of time, but thank you very much for breaking that operation down for us. One of the finest Israeli Special Forces operation. And of course, Israel has had a history of carrying those out, whether at Entebbe or in its doorstep in Gaza. But thank you very much, General Datta and Aditya, for joining us this evening to take us down that fraught path of hostage rescue that Israel has been doing year after year.